Hey there everyone, welcome back to another video. Over the past couple videos, we've been looking at polynomial operations. What that means is we've been looking at how to add, subtract, and multiply polynomials. That's what we're going to continue looking at in today's lesson by looking at some special pairs of binomials that create a pattern when multiplying. So this isn't going to work for everything, we're just going to look at three special cases. But if we can start to recognize the pattern, that's going to make our multiplication a little bit easier. We can always rely on double distribution, but if we start to recognize patterns, then it becomes a little bit easier. And the first one we're going to look at is the square of a sum. What does the square of a sum look like? Well, that is taking a sum, so that's taking something, let's just say it abstractly, like A plus B. That's a sum, and then I am going to square that. So remember that when I take something squared, I multiply it by itself 2 times. So what that means is I'm going to take I'm going to be using multiple markers here, so bear with me. A plus B times itself twice. So I'm going to take A plus B times A plus B. Now, if we use double distribution like we talked about in the previous video, what that is going to look like is going to be A squared plus AB plus BA plus B squared. So notice, remember that multiplication is commutative. And what that means is it doesn't matter in which order you multiply. So I still have like terms here in the middle because I'm still multiplying A times B, even if I say it B times A. So I have like terms. So what this turns out to be, and if I go back to my colors, I've got A squared plus 2AB plus B squared. So, if I have a square of a sum, A plus B squared, what that ends up being always is A squared plus 2AB plus B squared. So I'm going to take the first term and I'm going to square it. And then I'm going to add twice the product of both terms. And then I'm going to add the last term squared. So let us look at that a little bit further. Let's look at that in a couple of examples. So if I've got 7z plus 2 squared, what am I going to do there? Well, I'm going to label each of these A and B. So A is equal to 7z and B is equal to 2. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 7z and I'm going to square it. And then I'm going to take, following this pattern over to the left, I'm going to take plus 2a, which is played by 7z, plus 2 7z times b, which is 2. And then last but not least, I'm going to add 2 squared. So remember, ladies and gentlemen, you can still use double distribution. And I know this looks probably a little bit confusing because it's new, but through practicing it, it's going to click and you're going to actually be able to breeze through a square of a sum or these types of problems that we'll be discussing in this video. So if I finish this out, 7z squared, well that's 49z squared, plus 2 times 7 times 2, that's 28z, plus 2 squared, which is 4. Okay? So I'm going to have that, and then I'm going to change that color so you don't get that confused with what we're using for A and B. Make that green. Okay? So it just makes multiplication a little bit easier. Like an example for B, I've got A being played by 3x, and I've got B being played by 5. So I have 3x squared plus 2 times 3x times 5 plus 5 squared. So if I were to simplify this, I would get 9x squared. This middle term is going to give me 30x, and this last term is going to give me 25. All right, so that's the first of our special products. We have 2 more to go. I could also look at the square of a difference. Now, difference, remember, is subtraction. So I'm going to take A minus B squared. And that's the same thing as saying A minus B squared, which is equal to A minus B times itself twice. Now, if I were to double distribute, I would get A squared minus AB, right? A squared minus AB minus BA, and then negative B times negative B, well, that's going to give me plus B squared. So, once again, I can combine like terms here, and going back to my colors, if I have the square of a difference, that's going to follow the pattern of A squared minus 2AB plus B squared. Okay, so that's my second pattern. So when I did, going back to the previous slide, when I did a square of a sum, I did A squared plus 2AB plus B squared. When I take the square of a difference, I take A squared minus 2AB plus B squared. So let's look at a couple of examples real quick. So I have A being played by 3C, and I have B being played by 4. So A squared, what's that going to look like? 3C squared minus 2 times A times B plus B squared. And then when I simplify that, I end up getting 9C squared minus 2 times 3 times 4. Well, that's going to give me minus 24C plus 4 squared. Well, that's going to give me plus 16. And then another example for this one, 2m minus 3 squared. Well, A is being played by 2m, and B is being played by negative 3. So I've got 2m squared minus 2 times A, which is 2m, times B, which is, B is positive 3. B is positive 3. 2 times A, which is being played by 2m, times B, which is 3. And then I've also got plus B squared, which is 3 squared. So then if I simplify that, I end up getting 4m squared minus 2 times 2 times 3, so that is going to give me minus 12m plus 9. So that is our second product, which is the square of a difference. So those two are very similar. And our last one is kind of completely different, maybe even a little bit easier. It's the product of a sum and a difference. So that's going to look like if I had the sum times a difference. Well, if I were to double distribute this, I got a squared minus ab plus ba minus b squared. Well, if you take a step back, you'll realize I have like terms here, but I've got a negative ab plus ab, so that's going to go away. So the pattern here is that if I have the product of a sum or a difference, I'm going to take a squared minus b squared. So that's my big pattern here. That middle term goes away. That middle term cancels out. So if I were to look at some examples here, I've got A being played by 9D, and I have B being played by 4. So if I were to follow this pattern, I'm going to take 9D squared minus 4 squared. And then when I simplify that, 9D squared, that's going to give me 81D squared. And then minus 4 squared, so that's going to give me minus 16. This one's a little cool once you see that pattern, that middle term just completely goes away. And then our last example for this video, we've got 3y plus 2 times 3y minus 2. So I have A being played by 3y, and I have B being played by 2. So I have 3y squared minus 2 squared. So 3y squared, that's going to give me 9y squared minus 4. So 9y squared minus 4 is my final product. Alright, so those are our 3 special products that we will be looking at in today's video. I know it can be a little bit confusing. Hopefully it started to click towards the end. Just make sure I added one of each, at least one of each up here for you to try out. So make sure you get that done. I put a star near number 2 because I think that one might be a little bit different than in your notes. So just make sure you're doing the right ones. We will talk about this when I see you next in class. Just make sure you practice, ask questions if you got it. Make sure you do your part in making sure you understand this material. This is going to help, especially next unit and in your future classes. So, as always, be good, do some good. I hope you're all safe. Thank you for watching the video, and I will see you all when I see you.